Okay, now this seems to be fairly lively. So, once again, I would like to invite you to share, anybody who might like to, 3 or 4 people, to share what you heard. And if there's anything that somebody else said that kind of really made you kind of excited, made you intrigued, sparked your interest, that's what I'd like to ask you to share.
Thank you, Father. Even though I think that all of us should be involved in as much things as we can to assist and help our church and our community, Teresa was talking to me about Martha's Kitchen, which I had not been involved in. And so I'm very excited to be here on this Friday to be involved with that and to assist and do what I can to help. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Good openers. Now,
for those that don't know, I'm actually a nurse, 30 years now, retired. And I wanted to do the spirituality and do Eucharistic minister, and it just happens that the lady sitting next to me is in charge of Eucharistic ministry. So, how does that work?
that is why communication is so terribly important. One of the things that Father Tom Sweetser described the leadership night, and sometimes, I think anybody who's been involved in them can sometimes feel, we're spinning wheels, or not too sure just exactly where we're going. And that's one of the things that we are trying to address now in this leadership formation, as well as a result of tonight, proposing ways to kind of change or modify, tweak, shall we say, our structure. But he always called these leadership nights an environment for communication, in which people who otherwise would not be communicating with each other are in contact with each other. And that, in many ways, is kind of the lubricant for the functioning of our parish community, and certainly can take place through providential encounters like this. I always like to see providence is actually serendipity with grace. Anybody else?
Thank you. I'm involved in the administration, and my forte is public relations. And you can see on my jacket I have each one reach one. And that's what I think we should be doing. As a matter of fact, I've reached 2 that are here tonight.
Thank you. Now, would anybody else like to say what they heard from the other person who spoke to them?
She would love to be involved in a group for single moms. And I thought that was so beautiful to relate and share and be a part of that.
Okay, the last person who said to me that they would like to be involved in something that we don't have here, I put my arm around that person and said, that is such a great idea. Would you like to start it and organize it? And the precise person who can enable you to do that is sitting right next to you. All right.
I have just met Michael Harvey and his wife Denise, and we've had 3 sessions where we had to do small communication, and during all 3 times they spoke very intelligently on worship and liturgy. So I would recommend them for the worship, because you also said just now that that would be the one category you would be interested in. So therefore, I nominate them.
This is not a nomination session, but I think that, this is a session for discernment and for understanding, and I think that's what needs to be key here. Sometimes it is true, and it's not a matter of needing more members either. Sometimes, however, it is true that the Lord may call us into a different area and kind of challenge us than where our interests and inclinations lie. So it's always important to see the Lord's call as a multifaceted thing. And again, that's part of a different sort of discernment.
Especially if Sister Virginia tells you that's where you need to be.
The Lord speaks through all of us in one way or another.
Can you actually discuss the leaders of these commissions?
That's coming. That's down the line. What I would like to say, and I'll say this right now, what we are going to be about over the next 2 months will be reformulating the commissions, reformulating their mission, reformulating their leadership. So it's kind of in a state of suspension right now. But that's why I'm so happy with people like yourself and the others who raised their hand before, that we are successfully, I hope, if I don't scare you off, we are getting new blood and new interest relating with the people who did not put their hands up before, who are kind of veterans of this process. So we're bringing in kind of a new mix here. And what I would ask, down at the bottom, where it has tools for communication, that we, over the next month in particular, stay in touch. I will be sending out a whole variety of things for reflection, for comment, for suggestions, for thinking about, for raw materials for planning. Everybody can be involved in whatever level they would like to. You can be very active in giving comments. You can maybe just passively read and say until something sort of hits you and make a comment. But all of those things are going to be brought together in planning for how we will go into the fall to structure this leadership. What I would like to do is part 3 and part 4 to deal with fairly quickly, looking at what the commissions are, what they are not, what qualities are particularly needed and desirable for commission members, and then speak just a little bit about relationships. The commissions are not, I'm going to start with what they are not. They're not a task force. They're not doers. They're not people who say, well, this needs to be done in the church, okay, we'll get the commission to do it. Nor are they problem solvers. Nor are they a group that tells the pastor what to do or what not to do, or tells the parish staff what to do or what not to do. They're not fixers. They're not advocates. A commission member is not a person who has an idea and thinks it should be followed. There are other ways of getting that, getting ideas and that kind of thing into the air, but the commission is not one of those. So a person should not want to be part of a commission because they think they know how to fix things, or they think they know what should be done, and then they use the commission as their platform for doing, for getting done what they think should be done. So So I think that's a very, very important thing. What the commission, nor is the commission a kind of a public forum for airing grievances or getting public comment. It's not a town hall meeting sort of thing. Possibly something like a town hall meeting could be input for the commission to think about, okay, what are some of the directions that this area of the church should be going? But that's a very, very different thing. So what are they? Well, for one thing, they're visionary. And by vision, I don't mean just creating an ideal picture, but rather what I mean is looking at each part, each area, in relation to the whole. For example, on the commission, there should certainly be somebody who is knowledgeable about, say on the Outreach Commission, should certainly be somebody who is knowledgeable about and in some kind of a leadership capacity for, let's say, Martha's Kitchen. But the big contribution will not be to promote Martha's Kitchen, but to integrate Martha's Kitchen into the whole area of social justice, outreach, and service in the parish. And to relate it, to learn, how are the sick being served? How are other people who are disadvantaged being served? How are other needs being met? Where are there things that may need to be promoted? Where are bridges need to be built? So that would be the function of the commission. It's not so much to do those things, but to try to discover who can do them, how can they be done, to prioritize too. Should we put effort into this or put effort into that if we only have a limited amount of resources? Strategic and yearly planning is part of it. Periodically you do need a strategic plan, and that probably is going to happen within the next couple of years. I think the PAR process was something of a strategic plan. We've been also trying to do yearly planning. That has sometimes fallen by the wayside with the commissions, but that needs to be revived. Planning basically is setting priorities, setting goals, and discovering ways that those goals and priorities could be fostered, could be fulfilled. Assessment. What's going well? What needs help? What's lacking? What's redundant? Funneling. What we mean by funneling is basically supporting and helping groups to actually accomplish something. Being a channel through which somebody who is interested may be able to be put in touch with a particular activity or ministry that needs them and that they would be interested in. And most important, linking, enabling particular groups to interact with each other. That's something that is always sorely lacking in parish life. So very often, every single Catholic parish has a bunch of groups, each one of them thinking that they're the most important because they have the pastor's ear, and they can get a leg up on other groups because, well, they get to the pastor first. And, for everything like that to depend on the pastor is the essence of dysfunction. And what that means is in parishes where everything depends on the pastor, not a lot really happens because of those control and manipulation elements. So what happens in a good functioning parish depends more than anything on how groups relate to one another. Again, the idea of the environment of communication. So what's needed for commission members? Perhaps not everybody should be a commission member, because we need to discern these qualities in ourselves and in one another. Number one, of course, Christ-centered. Everything has to center on Christ. The idea of leadership more than management. Leadership, well, I say down below, you know, a leader has to be a communicator, has to be one of influence, has to be one who hears others, who listens to others, who is one with others, can't be always out in front, nor behind. Sometimes one can lead most effectively by stepping aside and allowing another to lead. And there needs to be a commitment to otherness. What I said before about ministry, building up the other. And there needs to be a breadth of outlook, attentive to the whole, an understanding of collaboration, so that they're not just saying, well, I think this should be done this way. And the ability to see and evaluate other points of view, not to just advocate one's own, but to evaluate and work with and collaborate with others. I'm going to finish with that question under part 4, so you might want to think about that. I've already talked about leadership. The difference between leadership and management should be obvious, but it isn't always. Management does mean getting people to work together. Management does mean the facility to be able to get things done according to a plan. Leadership more has to do with motivation, with communication of vision and ideals in an effective way. Not just one that makes people say, oh, gee, that's nice, and then walk off, but in an effective way that draws people together. What's the role of a pastor? Well, there's a lot of ways of describing it. The word pastor means shepherd. And our Holy Father has said the shepherd has to smell like his sheep, which means to be there as one of them, not lording it over them. The other role that is a liturgical one, but it is within the purview of every aspect of the parish life, is presider. In the olden days, the priest said Mass, and the people heard Mass. That was the language that was being used. And a very, very one-sided sort of thing. Now, the liturgy following Vatican II calls for active, intelligent participation by all, each according to distinct roles. And in some ways, the priest, as presider, is the sign and source of unity among the people who, on their own right, are engaged in various activities and ministries. So a sign of unity is, I think, mainly what is meant by presider. Teacher. Teacher does not mean conveying knowledge and information nearly so much as embodying our heritage of faith and opening up and unfolding our heritage of faith so that together we might discover the riches of that treasury. A connector, one who brings people together. One of the things that I just love to see is bringing people together and then having some things happening, some aha experiences, reactions happening, and I can sort of step aside. Visionary. The pastor is the one who is sometimes described as keeping alive a vision that motivates the togetherness of the parish and articulating not just his own vision or somebody else's vision, but articulating a common shared vision. Which leads me to my favorite image of pastor is mascot. And I had somebody take me to task about that in my former parish because they thought I was trivializing the role of the pastor. And I said, you know, in any team, the mascot is really the most important member of that team because it is the mascot that bears the vision, that bears the identity of the team. And team players, even team leaders come and go, but the mascot is the enduring symbol of the identity of that team. So I kind of like being a mascot. Pat me on the head once in a while. One area that we will need to talk a lot about as this planning goes on is what is the role of the staff in relation to the parish leadership. And I don't have clear-cut answers to that. I've got a few directions for thinking about it. You know, certainly when you are supporting somebody in a position, there are certain areas of commitment and expectations that have to be part of that job and that are being paid for. There's also a certain sense of continuity that the person who is in a position for a long time, an official position for a time, is able to maintain continuity even within the change of structures. And coordination and support. There are things that can only get done if somebody pays them. That is a reality. And volunteer management can never be done, for example, by a volunteer. Not in a long-term, wide-ranging basis. You do need somebody with a staff level of commitment to manage the people who are doing it out of their own Christian commitment. So we're going to be talking about and thinking more about just how the staff should relate to each of these commissions.